Do you think you know who he is? The perfect boy, with a heart-melting smile and a voice that made the world stop. The kid who went from a homemade YouTube video to packed stadiums and deafening screams. But what no one told you is that while the world applauded, he was drowning. That behind the cameras, the glory hid invisible scars. And that, for him, fame was never just a dream, it was also a prison. But before we dive into this story full of highs and lows, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any revelations, and stay until the end, because you're going to be surprised. The beginning of a fairy tale. You were born in a small town in Canada in 1994. You grew up in a humble home, raised by a single mother who fought every day to put food on the table. You didn't have much, but you had music. One day, your mom records you singing and playing drums at a school talent show. She posts it on YouTube. And suddenly, millions of people see that video. A manager discovers you. A bidding war between major labels begins. And at just 15 years old, you're no longer just a teenager. You're Justin Bieber, the boy who would become part of millions of lives. The dream that starts to come at a cost. At first, it was magical. World tours, passionate fans, money. But with every show, every appearance, something started to change. You couldn't walk down the street anymore. Every gesture, every word, was analyzed, judged, amplified by the media. The pressure to maintain the good boy image was suffocating. And little by little, fame stopped being a gift and became a shadow. The first cracks. Adolescence is tough for anyone. Now imagine living that phase with millions of people watching, expecting you to never mess up. Rumors started to spread. Compromising photos. Minor scandals. And every misstep turned into global news. People forgot you were only 16. And they treated every mistake as proof that you were losing yourself. The fury of the spotlight. The paparazzi harassment became unbearable. They followed your car, invaded your privacy, shouted provocations just to get a reaction. And when you finally snapped, the headlines were brutal. Justin Bieber loses control. The image of the sweet, perfect boy started to crack. And the more you tried to fix it, the deeper you seemed to sink. Loneliness in the middle of a crowd. You were surrounded by people, but completely alone. You couldn't trust almost anyone. There was always the doubt. Are they here for me, or for what I can give them? Meanwhile, the emotional exhaustion grew. Sleep became a luxury. And life, an endless schedule of commitments you no longer had the strength to keep. The warning no one wanted to hear. Between interviews and tours, you started showing signs that something wasn't right. A lost look. Confused words. Erratic behavior. But instead of stopping, the show went on. Because in the music world, stopping means losing everything. And you were still just a kid trying to survive in a world that doesn't forgive weakness. But if you think this was rock bottom, wait until you see what happened when the lights went out, and the silence revealed much deeper demons. When the light goes out, the spotlight still shone, but inside you, everything was already dark. The boy the world once knew had vanished, replaced by someone even you didn't recognize in the mirror. And with the pressure came the wrong choices. Alcohol became an escape. Marijuana, a temporary relief. Soon, harder drugs entered the picture. It wasn't about living it up, it was about numbing the pain. Scandals and cruel headlines. The mistakes started becoming routine. In 2014, you were arrested in Miami, accused of driving under the influence, resisting arrest, and taking part in an illegal street race. Your mugshot went viral. The internet exploded. That face, once featured on magazine covers with headlines like The Dream Boy, now came with Troubled Star. And behind it all was a young man begging for help, but being judged like a villain. The public breakdown. You started getting into fights on the street. Threw eggs at your neighbor's house. Snapped at fans trying to take photos without permission. Every time the press published another scandal, you sank deeper. And the more you tried to explain, the more they seemed to want to see you break. The pain no one saw. What the world didn't know is that behind the rebellion were old traumas. Anxiety. Depression. The constant pressure to be someone you no longer were. You started canceling shows. Spent days unable to get out of bed. And when you did get up, it was like you had to wear a mask that was getting too heavy. Love under attack. Your love life became fodder for tabloids too. Relationships ended under the camera's glare. And the public picked sides, sent hate, spread rumors. You couldn't live a love in peace. Every fight, every tear, became a weapon against you. The vicious cycle. The more the media attacked you, the more you isolated yourself. And the more you isolated, the more you messed up. It was an endless cycle. The industry's pressure to keep churning out hits was suffocating. Producers, managers, the label, everyone wanted results. But no one seemed to care how you were doing. The free fall. There came a moment when nothing made sense anymore. Fame, money, luxury houses, none of it filled the void. You had everything, and at the same time, you had nothing. Little by little, you started losing yourself completely. Your image was destroyed. The public that once loved you now attacked you. And deep down, you believed you might deserve it. In 2017, you canceled the rest of the Purpose World Tour, saying you needed to take care of your mental health. Some understood. Most didn't. For many, it was proof you couldn't handle the pressure anymore. For you, it was a last-ditch effort to survive. But the darkest was still to come. Because when the cameras pulled back, you had to face yourself. And that confrontation was the most painful of all. If you think the arrests, the drugs, and the scandals were the worst, wait until you see what happened when he faced the demons inside his own mind. The side almost no one has the courage to talk about. When the silence screams. When the music stopped. You realized the noise of the applause had been replaced by a much scarier sound, silence. And in that silence, the demons you'd always tried to ignore started speaking louder. Depression became constant. Anxiety attacks came without warning. You were afraid to sleep, and sometimes even more afraid to wake up. The real prison. It wasn't a physical prison threatening you anymore, it was a mental one. You were trapped inside your own head. Fame had turned you into a character. A character everyone either loved or hated. But no one seemed to care about the person behind that forced smile. And the worst part? You didn't even know who you were anymore. The public confession. In 2019, you wrote to the world, revealing the weight you carried. You spoke about drug abuse, about hurting the people you loved, about the emptiness you felt even at the height of success. It was a cry for help, and at the same time, a plea for forgiveness. Some were moved. Others said it was too late. The body starts to give in. It wasn't just your mind that was suffering. Your body started showing signs of wear. A diagnosis of Lyme disease and chronic health issues forced you to rethink everything. Suddenly, you weren't invincible anymore. You were vulnerable, fragile, human, the emotional rock bottom. There were days when you simply didn't want to get out of bed. Days when facing the world seemed impossible. You distanced yourself from friends, from projects, from everything that once made sense. It was like being trapped in a dark room, unable to find the door. The invisible scars. The worst part of this whole journey is that most people still saw only the pop star, the millionaire, the idol. But inside you were scars no amount of money could erase. And the constant fear that, at any moment, everything could come crashing down again. A tough choice. You knew you had to change, or you wouldn't survive. And little by little, you started seeking help. Therapists, faith, new priorities. But the road to recovery wasn't easy. Because for every step forward, it felt like 2 steps back. The final turn. This isn't a fairy tale story. There's no magical moment where everything gets resolved. But there was a point where you decided to fight. And even when you fell, even when you messed up, you kept trying. Because deep down, you wanted to believe there was still something good about being Justin Bieber. Fame gave you everything, but it also took more than you ever imagined. You met the darkest parts of yourself, were hated by millions, lost those you loved, and almost lost yourself forever. This was the silent battle of a star everyone thought they knew. Now that you've seen the dark side of this story, it's time to discover the other chapter. The chapter where the light starts to return. Click on the video beside and find out the good side of Justin Bieber's life, how he tried to turn pain into hope. After all this, what do you really think about Justin Bieber? Let us know in the comments below.